Marcel Duchamp's fountain has been causing headaches since 1917. It's an ordinary mass-produced urinal, turned on its back and signed R. Mutt. And the question that everyone who's come across it from that day to this must ask themselves is, does this count as a work of art? Many people have thought not, and there are, I think, 4 main objections to it being accepted as a work of art. None of them are stupid, but neither are any of them conclusive. The first objection is that because Duchamp didn't make it, it can't be a work of art. The idea here is of the artist as a lone craftsperson who does everything themselves. There are artists like this, however not all art is made that way. Since at least the Middle Ages, successful artists have run studios, employing any number of people to help carry out the work. Rodin, for instance, did not cast any of the bronzes or carve any of the marbles for which he is famous. He was a highly skilled clay modeller, so that was what he did, and then passed the rest of the work over to his studio assistants, who physically made the objects we see in museums today. So it's not necessary for an artist to physically make the artwork themselves. The second argument says that the urinal wasn't intended as an artwork when it was made, and so therefore it can't be an artwork. Even though Rodin didn't personally make his sculptures, everyone involved in their making knew that they were making art. This is true. However, museums are full of objects that were not intended as art when they were made. In fact, the whole idea of art with a capital A is a fairly recent European phenomenon. The people who made these objects were highly skilled, brilliantly imaginative and inventive, but they wouldn't have thought of what they were doing as art in the way that the people working in Rodin's studio would have done. These objects would have had all sorts of practical and ritual functions when they were originally made, but they lost those functions when they entered the museum and became instead objects for aesthetic contemplation. In effect, works of art. So, an object not originally intended as art can become one. The third argument is that anyone could do this, and therefore it can't be a work of art. And it's true that the level of manual skill is very low. The urinal was already made, and all Duchamp did was paint a name and date on the side. However, does the word do in anyone could do this mean perform or conceive? It's true that anyone could perform this, but it's less clear that anyone could conceive it. If it were a common conception, you'd have to ask why no one had done it before. And if it were a common conception, it probably wouldn't be the troubling object that it is. This objection also contains a demand that art should require manual skill, but it isn't only things that are difficult to perform that are worth looking at. In Japanese calligraphy, there's a tradition of enso painting, tracing a freehand circle on a sheet of paper. The viewers are not interested in looking at geometrically perfect circles, so nothing manually difficult is being asked of the artist. Instead, artists are required to find ways of making this simple gesture interesting, and this is a genre that has lasted for centuries, so it's not necessary to demonstrate manual skill in order to make a work of art. The fourth objection to fountain says that if this is art, then everything is art, and following on from that, if everything is art, then nothing is art. Stakes are high, implying that if fountain is accepted as a work of art, then the notion of art itself becomes empty and meaningless. Each of the 2 sentences in the argument contains a pair of clauses. If this, then that. The first sentence is the troubling one. If this is art, then everything is art. Does the conclusion follow from the premise? Is it true that if we accept fountain as art, that everything then becomes art? I don't believe it is, although it's close to the truth. If we accept fountain as art, then everything is potentially a work of art. And this is the big idea of the 20th century. Any object or event can now become a work of art. And this means that the word art no longer describes a class of objects like paintings or sculptures. Instead, it describes a way of engaging with the world. For example, in 1972, Joseph Beuys, with the help of a couple of students, swept the streets in West Berlin after a May Day parade. He was doing the exact same job as a street sweeper, the only difference being that it was designated by Beuys as a work of art. This changes the context in which the action is viewed and thought about. It becomes symbolic as well as functional, drawing attention to a labour that would normally pass unseen, a labour normally performed by migrant workers rather than those marching in the parade. Beuys's performance is only thinkable in the wake of Duchamp. Its aim, however, is surprisingly traditional. For centuries, artists have painted still lifes or landscapes to get us to look at the everyday world all around with fresh eyes and to think about it in new ways. Beuys's performance and Duchamp's urinal, for all their unconventional form, fit squarely within that tradition. So I cannot prove that Fountain is a work of art, and there's nothing wrong with being sceptical about it. But equally, its critics have not been able to prove that it's not one. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe, or visit my channel, Think of a Picture, where you'll find lots more short, thought-provoking videos. Thank you.